How will the 2008 presidential election be different from 2000 and 2004? Well, for one thing, the Supreme Court's already involved 18 days before the election, getting a jump on things this year. Another difference, the Supreme Court's decision this go-around favored the Democrats, probably. The High Court today overturned a lower court order that would have directed the state of Ohio to challenge the registration of some 200,000 new voters on Election Day. 200,000. But the Supreme Court agreed with the Ohio Secretary of State that systems to safeguard the vote from fraud already exist, and that the cross-checking of voter registration information against databases never intended for that purpose would have the effect of flagging and making problems for voters who really shouldn't have trouble voting. So Democrats can breathe slightly easier about Ohio for now. But Republicans in other states are already making noises about challenging new voters. Ohio appears to be the opening battle of a broader conflict. In the balance is voter turnout and, of course, maybe the winner of the election. How did the state of Ohio protect its vote from voter suppression while making sure the new voter rolls were legitimate? Well, joining us now is Jennifer Brunner, who is the Ohio Secretary of State. Secretary Brunner, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Glad to be here.
How important was this Supreme Court ruling today in your favor? I know the timing was rather dramatic.
This was immensely important. We look at it as a victory for Ohio voters. What the Ohio Republican Party was seeking to do was to have us prepare targeted lists of people whose ancillary data was subject to a mismatch by databases that our office has no control over, and that really were subject to things like data entry errors, matching issues, computer glitches. And we think that a lot of innocent people would have been subjected to being pushed into provisional ballots, and that would have not only caused them anxiety but clogged the voting places on Election Day, causing chaos and confusion, and just what we didn't want to happen in Ohio in 2008.
Do you think that the legal battle in which you have been engaged in Ohio is essentially a partisan war? Do you think that it is an effort to try to reduce the number of Democratic votes that will ultimately be counted on Election Day?
I think very much so, because the formula for winning an election is generally 50% plus one. If you can't give a good enough message to convince enough voters to go your way, the other way is either to increase the number of voters who vote with you or decrease the number of voters who vote against you. And by forcing these folks, or trying to force these folks, into provisional ballots, that means they don't get counted election night, they get set aside, and then the legal maneuvering starts after the election to pick them off one by one, and that is not democracy.
Today, Rick Davis, the McCain-Palin 2008 campaign manager, said this in reaction to what's been going on in your state. Quote, "What is no longer in question is the partisan nature of Jennifer Brunner's efforts to minimize the level of fairness and transparency in this election." I know you all in Ohio have thick skins about these issues, but I have to ask you how you feel about being singled out as a villain in this case by the Republican Party.
Well, my first concern is for the boards of elections, because they are on the ground in the trenches doing the work with the voters. And if I have to be the lightning rod for the boards of elections so that they can be left alone, undisturbed, then so be it, because my first concern is for the voters of this state, for a fair election, and for each individual to have the right to express their voice and to express their vote. So if that's the way they want to play it, I'll withstand it. We have 18 days, and I'll last till after the election. But Ohio is going to do a good job in its election this year, and I'm going to see that that happens.
One last quick note. I know we hear from a lot of viewers from Ohio in our show email all the time. If you want to speak to the voters of Ohio who are watching right now, I wanted to know if you have any encouraging words for them in case they're going to be facing long lines or essentially a long day or difficult day at the polls, given that you're expecting, I believe, 80% voter turnout.
We have done a lot of preparation with our boards of elections. So in the counties, and there are 53 of them where we're using the touchscreen machines, we have some alternatives for them. They can request a paper ballot and they can vote it. It will be counted election night. And they'll have the opportunity in most of the polling places to go in one of two lines. So we think that's going to move the lines much more quickly. We've been planning, we've been using common sense, and we've provided poll worker training that's consistent all over the state of Ohio. So we think voters will be confident this year.
Thank you. Ohio Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner, I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you.